privilege of visiting Windsor, Essex on a rainy, blustery couple of days. I think we had a little bit of snow too, even though it was springtime. Interesting place. Windsor is a city across the river, the Detroit River, from the city of Detroit. It's part of Essex County. The city itself is about 216,000. County's 393,000 beyond that. Lovely place. It's just across that border, and that border really defined, I think, the past, certainly, of Windsor, and to a lesser extent, perhaps, of Essex that spreads east from there. And until recently, what that meant was automotive. It was the automotive assembly, automotive manufacturing, automotive tool and die, automotive, you name it, place to go in that part of Ontario, even though agriculture was and continues to be about 14% of their total GDP. But it was automotive, and of course we know what has happened to North American automotive manufacturing. A severe crisis, the bankruptcy of two of the big three automotive makers in the same year through the financial crisis. And that shock set off an amazingly high rate of change in that community. And we're going to be talking about how that community responded and why it responded the way it did. Just a smattering of examples I saw, everything from reinventing journalism education, creating new technologies and developing applications for existing ones, universities finding incredible new ways to extend what they do into the economy, even boosting the productivity of agriculture by a factor of 10 or more. Fascinating examples. Now, the memories of that crisis are still vivid. They're still the stuff of daily life there, and they continue to drive this community in many, many ways. And I think started by talking about the border. That border is still going to be a very important part of the life of this community, the economy of this community, but perhaps in some new and very exciting ways. So let me stop now and introduce you in words and in pictures and sound to Windsor, and then we'll be having a conversation after that.
At some point in your life, you'll meet them. There's many ways to describe them. Exceptional, talented. They get things done. They inspire you to push yourself, to achieve more, to be better at everything you do. And it's not always what these remarkable people achieve that you admire, but that they do so with such grace, just going about their business with purpose. There's a term for these people: quiet giants. There are communities that exist in the very same way, quietly going about being exceptional, achieving far beyond expectations. Regions that people are drawn to, where companies move to, where there's a harmony that's fed by technology, where people use technology to achieve, organizations to help, and corporations to succeed. Windsor, Essex is one of those places. A quiet giant. What's widely known about Windsor, Essex is this: we're located at the apex of North America's most integrated transportation network, a hub for all major North American markets. We're home to some of the world's most prominent brands, including Caesars and Hiram Walkers. The Windsor-Detroit border is host to over $300 million of trade each day, making it the richest border crossing in the world. Per capita, we're the most culturally diverse region in Canada, a nation that celebrates its diversity. We are globally recognized for our manufacturing and engineering capabilities, and have been for decades. And we were once the gateway to freedom for the Underground Railway. That said, we're not utopia, but what's uncommon, what's unique, is the resolve of our people, our institutions, and corporations that choose to reside here. A resolve to help, to serve others. Here, we live by each other's happiness. Now, there's a belief out there that says if you think too much, you feel too little. But in Windsor, Essex, these two walk hand in hand. The more we think, innovate, create, the more we feel, give back, and support. Our institutions, hospitals, university, college, all share a common mandate: to improve the human condition. Our government is business friendly because we know they can blaze new trails. And corporations in Windsor, Essex are trailblazers. Of that, there is no doubt. Those who aren't aware of who and what we are may ask, why Windsor, Essex? Those in the know ask, why not? And what they know is that Windsor, Essex is a quiet giant.
I'm sitting here with Warden Tom Bain. I've started off a question for all the people in the audience, which is, do you now or have you ever run a major prison, Warden?
No.
Oh, okay. Warden actually then doesn't mean somebody who runs a prison. Warden means what?
Warden means that you are head of a number of mayors. There are 7 municipalities within Essex County, and I'm elected amongst my peers as the head of all the other mayors.
The boss of all bosses. All right.
So I have to deal with 10 councilors. He has to deal with 7 mayors.
Okay. So just want to make that clear because I loved the term, but I suddenly thought people might think that there's a whole other dynamic going on here. Well, welcome to New York, and thank you for that
Robert.
video, and thank you for all the things that I saw. Okay, I very briefly sketched that issue of the crisis, which is vivid in our memory. Just either you, Eddie, or you, Tom, just talk a little bit about what that meant in Windsor, Essex, just a couple of years ago.
No, and I appreciate it, and thank you, Robert. As you heard, there's a common theme and certainly a common element to all the stories today from all the regions. The Windsor, Essex story is somewhat similar and somewhat different. In your introduction, you talked about manufacturing in the automotive industry. We're a region of 350,000. In the automotive industry and the direct and indirect related industries, there's 50,000 people that are employed. And with the decline in manufacturing, decline in the automotive industry, and certainly the bankruptcies that followed, can you imagine someone walking into your office and saying, by the way, 40,000 people have just lost their jobs, and 2 of your major employers have declared bankruptcy, and one of them, GM, is leaving the city and the region completely. And in normal situations, that's the unemployment issues that you have to deal with. You have to find jobs for people. People have to pay their mortgages, put food on the table. But when you're in a region that is a one industry region, and has been for decades and decades, your tax base is now completely eliminated. And when I say tax base completely eliminated, it's because for decades that industry did well, it subsidized everyone else. So when they left, hundreds of millions of dollars left with them, and that created tens of millions of dollars issues for us with regards to tax revenues. So when other cities were talking about having the opportunity to make investment in infrastructure, we have no assessment. We've had negative assessment growth for the last several years. So we've had to make the infrastructure investments. We've had to find ways to do things with very little money and without taxing people, because obviously that's the last thing that we want to do as municipal leaders. So we've had to really go back to the drawing boards, and we've, as a region, focused on a number of areas, a number of disciplines. We used the crisis as an opportunity now to focus on post-recession, to focus on the recovery. And focusing on the recovery, we knew we needed something. We knew we needed to modernize our cities and our regions. We had to have modern infrastructure. We had to have modern amenities. We had to have a workforce that was trained, that was ready, that was capable, a workforce that only knew one thing, automotive. And now people that worked in the factory for 20, 30 years had to go back to school. So the collaboration with the universities and colleges helped us get that workforce ready. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that our region was appealing. It was the most affordable, appealing region. And for the last 3 years, that's what we focused on, modernizing our region, providing opportunities for people to be retrained, making sure that we have the amenities of cities for a high quality of life, while at the same time making sure that we're affordable and attractive.
Let's talk for a moment about who that we is, because something that I heard over and over again, starting with the breakfast of all the mayors that you kindly invited me to, was that the question of, geez, we didn't used to really talk to each other very much. We didn't really used to do anything very much together. Instead, it was mine and it was yours, and we're both happy. That changed. And could you talk about that? Because in a crisis, there's 2 ways you can go. You can either say, I'm going to put up walls and defend my territory, or you can do something else. What happened?
Well, that was exactly what was happening. We had those silos there, and when the crises came along, we were very fortunate to have leaders such as Mayor Francis and many of our leaders in education. And it was certainly decided that we needed to sit down and come up with how are we going to solve this crisis. If we continue with our silos, we're not going anywhere. We're going to fold our tents. And the groups began to meet together through the direction a lot of our University of Windsor and St. Clair College heading up those groups. They met together and looked at it as what we need to do is focus on our strengths. We knew, as Mayor Francis said, we had a lot of potential there with the auto industry. What we had to do was change that focus, and we looked at those strengths and saw that we knew how to build things, we knew how to grow things, especially out in my area, the rural area, and we knew how to move things or transport things. And those were three strengths that we had, and we began to build upon those and pull together. And certainly was an effort not on any one area, but on a number of areas.
Interesting. What was interesting as well is that it seemed to be happening at the political level, it seemed to be happening at the academic level. I toured an assembly plant, a Chrysler assembly plant, and what was interesting was in a completely parallel or maybe related movement, the same thing was happening there. They were saying, we have to break down decades of history.
Yeah, and you know, the crisis for us hit so quickly, and it shook the very foundation that we've been certainly accustomed to in the traditions that we've been operating under. That we knew that we had to respond, and we didn't have the luxury of time. We had 2 to 3 years. We had to put this thing back together. And there's so many things to do. We had to get our financial house in order. We had to reduce property taxes, change the tax regime. We had to make life affordable for our residents. We had to invest in infrastructure. And as a result, it brought everybody closer together. And I don't think we all set out, and yes, the barriers were there. And I think anybody in this room that's operating in a region would have to recognize that the competitive spirit and the competitive nature of operating in a region always naturally leads to some barriers. But the leadership, as the warden talked about, they came together at all levels and said, listen, we got to break it down. And as a result of that, you saw that distill into the factory, onto the shop floor. You saw that distill into the local business community. And everybody picked up the pieces. And the wonderful thing is about that video, and you touched upon it when you were visiting us, there's a new spirit of pride. There's a new, like, we've now given ourselves permission to really go out there and celebrate what it is that we have as a region. And that video spoke to it. It spoke to the resilience of the people. That wasn't there 2 or 3 years ago. So one thing that came out of the crisis, it brought people closer together, but it brought them together with a common purpose and common resolve, and that's starting to pay off.
It's interesting, while you were talking, I was thinking, I think it was there. It was, what do they call that, pent-up demand?
Yeah.
There's a pent-up demand for the things that have happened. Yeah. All right, so we've talked about the crisis. We've talked about, tough times make tough people move forward. Let's talk about some assets. In terms of broadband, Windsor's got the population density to have a reasonably competitive set of broadband offerings, but a lot of your land is rural, and I know that government has stepped in to help solve some of the problems. Government and institutions have stepped in to help solve some of the problems of connectivity. Mm-hmm. Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, we've been working on that problem for approximately 15 years, working, as I said earlier, through the university and the college, and they've headed that up for us. And we feel that just recently, within the last couple of years, we've reached out to our hospitals, to our educational centers, to our automotive industries, and we've put in almost 2,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable. So we've reached out to our main core groups, and the one remaining area that we really needed to get into was the rural areas. That kind of remained open, and that's an area where just recently we received a grant from the provincial government, and now we're going to have 96% of all of Windsor and Essex County under fiber optic cable. And I really need to, if I can, jump in and throw a little story that is so interesting. I went to one of the local veterinarians. As I say, we've looked at our health care and all those other areas, but we've gone one step beyond in that we've even gone into animal care and stuff. And I went to the veterinarian, and this was a couple years ago, and he said, you know what, look at my facilities here. I just built them 5 years ago. I am a leading vet. And I said, well, I know. They bring, he mainly works on horses. They bring horses in from Toronto, the largest tracks in Ontario, for him to operate on. And he said, I'm losing all my customers. I cannot operate because I can't send, they've got x-rays, they want to send them. I get their x-rays here. I can't download them. I can't send anything back to Toronto. He said, it's a shame. I'm going to have to move to the States. I have no thing, unless you can do something with broadband. Well, my best answer was, we are pushing, and we are pushing hard. And the other day when I went in and saw him, and he heard the news about our 1.5 million, and this was going to take in his area, he said, You saved my business. You saved my business. My wife and I are not moving to the States now. We're going to stay here. I'll be able to keep all my clients that come in from Toronto, clients that even come in from the States. He said, for me to operate on their animals, he said, it saved me. It was just a really heartwarming story, an individual story, but a heartwarming story to hear him say, and certainly wanted to keep them because we don't have a lot of veterinarians in the area. So it was really a great story.
Yeah, that's, talk about a new age we're living in. You can't even cut up a horse without broadband anymore.
Now, earlier there was a question that was asked of one of the earlier delegations as to whether or not broadband and the infrastructure was used to try to save money for the taxpayers through consolidation of services or the different delivery of services in municipal government. And as we know in Ontario, just like everywhere else in the States, and I'm sure in Europe as well, municipal governments are forced to do more with less, and as a result, they've got to find the better way of doing it. We use the broadband technology, we use that infrastructure. We've introduced 311, 211, which led to the consolidation of all of our call centers. By doing that, reduces the cost of the taxpayer in terms of delivery of service, but also improves the delivery of the service because people now have one point of access, one point of contact, where they can get information as it relates to municipal services or social services. They can find out where and what is happening in their region because of that opportunity. We see that in how we're treating with our emergency responses, where the warden and I can be sitting in an operational center and we can have our first responders on a scene, whether it's a massive pileup or whether it's something at the airport, and we're able to, through our web-based technology, through the infrastructure, be able to provide the leadership in the direction that's required. So that is leading the transformation at the municipal level in terms of government delivery of services, just like you see it at the vets or like you would see it in the Chrysler plant.
That's right. Yes, just yesterday if you were at our workshop, we saw a demo of that system, Web EOC, and tomorrow we'll be announcing which one of our 7 applications is our coolest broadband app. I'm very conscious of our time. The clock is ticking on us. I saw some interesting things in terms of workforce development, and we could talk about a lot of them, but could you talk a little bit about the Mediaplex? I thought that was probably one of the most vivid examples of reinventing workforce or education.
One of the things that you do when you go through a crisis and when 20, 30, 40,000 people lose a job and you need to find them a new job is you first ask the question, okay, what are the skills that we have in our region? And if we know what the skills are today, what are the skills that are going to be required tomorrow? And then you quickly identify the gap, and when you identify that gap, you're able to say, okay, what do we need to do to respond? And that's where the university and the college play a key role in any economic recovery, because it's through the university and the college and through institutions like that that we're able to fill that gap through skills training and skills development. The Mediaplex that you speak about is a program with St. Clair College, and it's a partnership between St. Clair College, the City of Windsor, and the federal government. The college recognized that there was a gap in terms of journalists. The journalism of today was different from the journalism of yesterday. You need to be all well-rounded, digitally be ready to express the story digitally, on paper, in print, and on radio. And what they recognized is there was a skill gap there. So the college developed the curriculum. Now they developed the curriculum, they had the comfort level that they were going to be able to produce this type of student that would then go in and find the opportunities, whether on the warfields in Afghanistan or in Ottawa or Toronto or wherever they were reporting from. But they needed help. So they needed a building. That's where the city stepped in. We gave them one of our buildings. They rehabbed it. The federal government gave them some money, $5 million. And today it's a beautiful building, and it's got 400 or 500 students that are now exploring a full-rounded program in that journalism program that otherwise would not have been there. And they're now employed everywhere. And they now have skills that are more employable today than they were yesterday. And the ward and I are often invited to go in there, and when we're going in there for an interview, we're in there for 5 minutes, but they got us on print, they got us on digital, they got us on web-based, and they certainly got us on media. So it's pretty exciting.
Yep, and in a time when journalism is losing people like crazy, they say that something like 95% of their graduates are all working.
All of them. Yeah.
Again, we could go on and on to a million different things, and not to slight the University of Windsor. You've got educational assets there. Probably in about between 5 and 10 years, I'm going to predict that if you go through a security thing where your fingerprint is involved, you're going to find that they're not doing it with light anymore, they're doing it with sound. And the University of Windsor is going to commercialize an ultrasound technology for fingerprinting. That sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? But here's what's cool. By using sound, you can detect not just the pattern on your fingertip, but also the pattern of the tissues and blood vessels underneath it. So it becomes completely, there's no way you could ever get, you can do anything you want to the surface of your finger and you'll still be identifiable. Fascinating technologies that we can't go into any further. But let's talk about some other innovations that are going on in that community. I want to run out to the rural area, to a place that I was privileged to visit, and talk a little bit about a company called Nature Fresh. Warden, you like to tell us about that?
They are certainly on top of their game there. They've got over 160 acres under glass and just doing a tremendous job. When you go in and look, and they have a small little box there, and they're growing 60 pounds of tomatoes out of that little box with the plants going up. And everything is totally regulated. The amount of water that goes in there, fertilizer, everything. The temperature's all regulated digitally. It's just a tremendous job, and it even carries into their whole program of marketing. When you get into the marketing aspect and into the growth, if you go in as we did and go down the aisles and look at the vines, every vine has 4 tomatoes on it.
That's right.
Every vine has 4 tomatoes on it. And when you get into the packaging end of it, if there is a problem down the road in the marketing end, it can all be traced back. Every tomato can be traced back to when it was packaged, where that plant came from, and who actually did the packaging
who handled
there.
it. Yep.
All by a barcode that's on the packaging. And tremendous.
I just wrote a blog about it in which I called it, forget greenhouses, it's digital farming. There's 4 tomatoes on it because through experimentation they discovered that 5 tomatoes, it gets to the point where it starts to sap the energy of the plant, and 3 tomatoes, you're not quite living up to its potential. Okay, that's how they get 10 times the productivity out of it. John, how am I doing on time? Okay, I can't let the Mayor Francis go without talking about something that's going on in terms of the border. I talked about the border being the future. Well, then you'll get your chance. The border being the future, and about the fact that trade is going to take on a whole new meaning in an age of great concern about security. And I wonder if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about this plan that's coming forward.
As you saw in the video, Windsor, Essex, and the Windsor-Detroit corridor is home to 28% of all trade between Canada and the U.S. 10,000, 12,000 trucks. We are in the middle of a production line that is the main artery that supplies the NAFTA backbone. There's a new border that's being constructed, $3 billion, but post 9/11, we've had to work with the U.S. government and try to find different ways to get the border moving seamlessly while dealing with the high risk versus the low risk goods. In post 9/11, the only thing that kept moving was rail, and the U.S. government, for the first time, allowed for U.S. authorities on Windsor soil, Canadian soil, to inspect all rail cars prior to entering the rail tunnel into the U.S. through gamma technology. So we are establishing a new pre-processing facility at Windsor International Airport. And that pre-processing facility is going to be the umbrella organization, if you will, which will house all of the U.S. and Canadian authorities. So all goods that are destined for the U.S. market will have to be cleared through Windsor Airport, and it's going to be done through technology, all through from inspections to certification to infrastructure and secure infrastructure, because once you're cleared, you got to be on a secured infrastructure route to the border, and that is overseen by the cameras and by all the Homeland Security requirements I won't get into because of time. So we're very excited about it, and it's a border inspection post. And literally, it's going to be a digital border inspection post. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow us, both as countries, and you've heard the President and the Prime Minister recently announce the secure perimeter that they're working on. But it's going to allow us as 2 countries to have this digital border inspection post with people on the ground, allowing us to pre-clear the low-risk goods. So if the tomatoes are going through, they don't have to get stuck at the actual border crossing. That we can deal with the high-risk offenders at the actual border crossing. So tomatoes, cucumbers, products coming in from Frankfurt or from Amsterdam will be able to get to Texas, and they'll clear through digitally, and they'll get to their point within less than 24 hours.
So I talked about the border being your past. I think the border is your future, but it's a completely different kind of value being added to it. Is there a burning question out there that we can throw into this mix before we close?
Barry Gander, I know that in your inspection you wrapped up Robert and took him through the tunnel to the other side. I was wondering if you could comment on the transparency of borders that you guys are establishing.
Can I comment on the, no, go ahead.
It's probably better to come from him.
Yeah, they have a lot more people get shot in Detroit than get shot in Windsor.
Just, yes.
As a result of which, they have a
lot
lot
more.
more acute care facilities in Detroit than they have in Windsor. They've got some, but well, occasionally, as you know, in crises and chronic in situations, all of a sudden a lot of bad things can happen at once. So if they get overwhelmed in Windsor with acute care, emergency care, they have established a protocol that allows them to move a patient, in this case it was me, in a gurney, wrapped in a blanket with a monitor on and a bunch of gear, strapped in a chair trying to look polite and smile while I was talking to doctors, in 10 minutes from one emergency room across the international border and into another emergency room, which is fairly remarkable. The driving distance and the technology was cool, but just trying to clear U.S. Customs and Immigration in 10 minutes, I mean, come on. So it was really remarkable, and to me, the most remarkable part of the experience was being rolled into the emergency room in Detroit and sitting there and surrounded by a bunch of nice people, and they're all talking to me, and what I'm thinking is, when are they going to let me out of this thing? And 10 minutes go by, 12, 15 minutes, I'm thinking, well, maybe this is it. This is it for the rest of the tour, but eventually they relented and let me out. So
We were enjoying it.
I know you were enjoying it. But it was truly, it was a remarkable demonstration, and the technology followed me all the way. If I'd had anything wrong with me, they would have known about it as we rolled into the hospital, because it all would have downloaded to their system. So it was a pretty impressive display.
You wanted to see healthcare, and we figured that no better way of displaying it, but 2 cities, a state, a province, and 2 countries in less than 10 minutes from table to table. So.
And really, I felt a lot better when we finished. Gentlemen, we're sorry we had to do such a quick dance through a lot of content, but thank you very much. You did it nobly, and good luck.
Thank you.